Okay, so this is going to be a more long-form tutorial that will go in depth about the different sorts of ways that you can mod RE Engine games. So this includes DMC5, Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3, Resident Evil Village, Resident Evil 7 kinda, but that has a caveat. Resident Evil 7 is a little weird, so proceed with caution if you do want to mod Resident Evil 7 for whatever reason. Okay, so you're going to be needing a few things. For starters, like, the thing that you, absolutely need is pretty much any RE Engine game. Like I said, DMC5, any of the newer Resident Evil games, that sort of thing. You can get them from Steam, you can get them from any CD key site, you can get it from the crack dealer behind your house. Doesn't matter where you get it, as long as you got the game, you're good to go. The next thing that you'll need is a list of the pack file names, because basically how the RE Engine games work is that all the files are stored in this pack, and they have a list of names, and if you try to extract them without that list of names, you're just going to get a bunch of numbers and shit like that, and you're not going to know where to look for things. After that, you're going to need a program called Noesis in order to view the files. You'll need a script in order to view RE Engine files, because Noesis can't natively view RE Engine files. And you'll need a 3D modeling program. In this case, we're going to be using Blender, because that's what I know. I personally think Max is dog water, because it sucks, and it's just got a cluttered interface, and Blender is easy and simple to understand. Optionally, you will also need a plugin for Blender that allows you to just skip the step from Noesis of exporting to FBX, but we'll get there when we get there. I'll show you how that'll work. So I'll leave a link to all the different things that you'll need, like the log file, the list log file, the RE tool. You'll need that as well in order to extract the files. The Noesis plugin, Noesis itself, Blender. You can use pretty much any version of Blender, but it's recommended that you use anything beyond 2.8. So go ahead and just download all of those files, and then once you're ready to continue, just keep continuing. You know, this is a video, you can pause it, okay? I'm not holding you hostage here. So once you're all ready to go, once you have everything all downloaded, extract it all to a place where you're going to remember where it is. I personally have a modding folder. I called it texture modding because I started out with texture modding, but now I pretty much do a little bit of everything. But I basically just have all the programs I need, my whips, stuff like that. So for now, I'm going to put it into the mod tutorial folder I made here. And I'm going to make a new folder, call it RE tool. And I'm going to extract it all over here. And then once you get the DMC5 pack names list, this is the newest one, by the way, because it did change a little over time, especially with the update to add Virgil into the game. So it's important that you have the newest version of the list. So I'm just going to copy that over into the RE tool folder. I'm going to remove this little one at the end. And before you start extracting, what you are going to want to do is you're going to want to select extract pack.bat. Edit it with anything. You can use Notepad or Notepad++. I just use Notepad++ because I prefer it. And you're going to want to change this line so that way it has the game that you want to use. So by default it says RE2, but if you're doing RE3, you change it to RE3 pack names, especially if that's the one that you downloaded. In our case, we're going to be doing DMC5, so just change it to DMC5 pack names, save. And then after that, you're going to want to go to your Steam directory where you have DMC5 saved. Go to DMC5, and then you are going to want to choose rechunk000.pack. And you're going to drag it over to extractpack.bat. It'll say open with extractpack.bat. And then this command prompt will open up, and it'll basically just start going through all of the different files. And it's going to take a long time for the base file. I'm going to stop this right now because I already have the files extracted, and I don't want to do that. And if you want the Virgil DLC stuff, do extract pack 5 right here. So just choose rechunk000 pack patch 5. Extract it same way that you would extract the other one. So once you're all done with that, now what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to find wherever you extracted Noesis to. So for me it would be here, Noesis, and you're going to want to go into plugins, Python, and you're going to drag fmt.remesh.py right here. And for me, I already have it, but I'm just copying it over so that way you guys know what, you're doing. And now you'll be able to view the DMC5 files in Noesis. In my case, I already know where pretty much everything is. That's like not even a flex. That is the worst thing to be able to know. But so for this tutorial, I'm going to be showing you how to modify a Dante model. So in that case, it would be PLO 100 Dante body. And if you just click on that, I have it set to open with Noesis by default. You'll probably get a prompt that says open with which program. Just choose select more programs and find Noesis. And if you just give it a second, you know, you can see the model. Oh, look at that. Wow, it's Dante's body. He has no head. No head? But, yeah. So normally what you would do if you didn't download the Blender plugin is... Sorry, just give me a sec. I closed it. You would go to File, Export, and export it to FBX. Click Export, and it'll export to FBX. However, if you did install the Blender plugin, then you can totally skip just opening up Noesis. You probably won't even need to touch it. And you can just open up Blender. So once you open up Blender, you'll be greeted with a screen that looks something like this. The picture on it might be a little different if you're using a different version of Blender, because I'm personally using 2.81. You can use up to 2.9 or 3.0. I just prefer 2.8 because that's what I know. You can just click off to the side. And real quick, let me just turn on the macros so that way you guys can see what I'm clicking and what I am doing. So I'm just going to press N to hide that menu off to the side. And a few things about Blender is that it is very heavily shortcut based. So you gotta remember a bunch of shortcuts in order to know, like, what to do. You can always, like, interact with the screen by using the mouse, but I personally prefer to use shortcuts. So if I just press A, that'll select everything. You press delete, that deletes everything. So after deleting all that stuff, what we're gonna wanna do is we're going to wanna go to Preferences, we're going to want to go to Install, and we're going to want to go to wherever you downloaded the RE engine plugin. So for me, it's going to be right there, the Blender RE Mesh Noesis wrapper. And if you just refresh and I look for Community, right here, it won't be like selected by default for you, but like you just got to select it. And you got to choose your Noesis exe file path in order for it to properly work. If you don't set this, it won't be able to import the meshes for you. So for me, that would just be in my texture modding folder, Noesis and Noesis exe. And we're all good to go. And so from there, you can just go to Import RE Mesh, and you can choose which mesh you want to import. So in my case, I want to import a Dante mesh because that's what I'm going to be working with. So I'm going to import his body model. So RE Tool, RE Chunk, Natives, 64, Character, Layer, PLO 100, and there's the mesh. It'll take a second to convert the mesh from the RE format to FBX, but then it shows up just like that. So as you can see, I have the body mesh all imported, but I also imported the head in because the model that I'm working with does wrap around the neck, so I do want to be sure that his neck and his chest aren't clipping properly. This is an optional step, you don't need to do that, but I just personally did it because that's my preference. So before we start importing the mesh and getting into the nitty-gritty of things, let's start with just a few basic movement things that you need to know about using Blender. So Blender is optimally used with an actual mouse, not like a trackpad on a laptop. So you use the middle mouse button, just hold that down and click it in to just rotate the camera around. If you press Shift and use the middle mouse button, you can pan the camera around. You can scroll up and down to zoom in and out respectively. Left click is to select, right click is to just open up any context menus. And the most important part is a numpad. If you don't have a numpad, you'll have to either simulate one or remap your keys on Blender to do it. But for the numpad, it lets you quickly change camera views, and it also lets you change between orthographic camera and perspective camera. So what perspective camera is basically what this looks like. It looks like, you know, there's a perspective. You can see how the background, the grid in the background slowly vanishes. That's perspective. If I press 5 on the numpad, it turns into an orthographic camera, which makes it look a lot more flat and even, and it's a lot easier to work with models in this way, in my opinion. So you just press numpad 5 to toggle between perspective and orthographic. By default, the camera for the viewport is always going to be set to perspective. If you use numpad 1, you'll be brought to orthographic front. So this is the front of the model. If you do numpad 3, you'll be brought to orthographic side. That's you know, the side of the model, obviously. 7 is the top of the model, and 9 is the bottom of the model. And if you ever want to be brought to the behind of the model, let's say, you just press Control Numpad 1, and you'll be brought to the behind. Control Numpad 3 brings you to the other side. Numpad 7 brings you to the bottom. That's basically what you do in order to control the camera. You can also press Control and use the 4, 6, 2, and 8 to pan the camera around in orthographic view if you don't feel like using the mouse key. But those are your options for moving around. So I'm going to start by importing my model now, so that way we can get into the nitty-gritty of doing this tutorial. So I'm going to be using this suit model that I have. And as you can see, it's a bit smaller than Dante's model, which is not a problem. Also, if you do want to hide stuff, by the way, which is what I just did, just press H. If you want to unhide stuff, press Alt-H to unhide everything. I'm just going to press Control-Z to hide everything again, because I prefer to have it hidden. But, so what we're going to do now is we're going to resize the model so that way it fits better over Dante's body. So I'm just going to choose the model over here, and I'm just going to press Shift to select all the different sub-meshes for the model. Then I'm going to press Control and select the armature. And the shortcut for resizing stuff is S for scale or size. It's easy to remember the shortcuts often if you try to associate the letter that they use with a word. So in my case, I associate S with scale or size. So I'm just going to do that in order to just get it closer to his size. Yeah, and I'm going to press G to grab the model, and I'm going to press Y so that way it moves only along the Y-axis. And you can do this for all sorts of transformations. So, for example, if you want to move the model up, if you press G, Z, it'll move only along the Z-axis. If you press GX, it'll only move left and right along the X-axis. A thing to remember is X, Y, and Z. You learn these in school, pretty much in any middle school math class, but, you know, X is left and right, Y is back and forth, and Z is up and down, so good to keep in mind. So, after that, what we're going to want to do is, I personally do this is totally optional, but it makes it easier for me to see the bones, which is what these triangles are. They're bones that allow you to move around the model. I'm going to set the display to stick, and I'm going to set them to be in front, so that way I can see them no matter what, so that way they aren't hidden behind any models. I'm going to select the armature. I'm going to choose this little drop-down menu up here, and this switches what mode that you are viewing your model or your armature in. And in this case, we're going to want to go into pose mode. And so once we're in pose mode, we're pretty much free to resize and scale the model as we please along these individual bones. So I'm going to grab the upper arm bone, and if I press R to rotate and Y, this will rotate it along the Y-axis and make it look like that. But it looks like that won't be good, so I'm going to grab the shoulder, I'm going to rotate that along the Y-axis, I'm going to make it sit just a little more relaxed, so that way it overlaps more closely with his jacket. That's basically what we're trying to do here, is we're trying to get the model that we want to import to be as close to the shape of the original RE engine mesh as possible. So I'm going to keep doing that. So you can keep using the shortcuts that I taught you before. So, you know, R to rotate along the Y-axis in that case, G to grab, I'm just going to show, you know, like that, and S to scale. And you can use this to your advantage in order to shape the mesh however you want to. And it doesn't have to be perfect, because we can make it perfect later. And even then, it still doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to be close. So I'm just going to be time-lapsing through this and just doing my little process of reposing the model. So yeah. I'm just going to interject here real quick to show you guys something. If you do want to see how it looks as you're posing it up, you can just select a mesh, press H, just to be sure that the mesh looks okay. Because even when you're posing, it doesn't always look perfect, and sometimes you'll need to know where to make adjustments in terms of sizing, or later on when we get into that sculpting. So So I'm just going to interject here real quick with a bit of advice here. So because I totally forgot to mention this, but if you're like me and you're lazy and you don't like redoing the same pose on both sides of the mesh, what you can do is you can press this little button up here, and what this will do is it'll mirror your poses across both sides. And if you can just see here, both the legs are moving like this. And if you're like me and you forgot to do this when you started posing, that is not a problem at all. Because if you just select the bones that you did after turning this on, and you just press like any sort of transform command, it'll automatically snap the other bone to match that bone. But while we're here, I'm just going to interject real quick and mention that it's often very important to get, at the very least, the hands to look accurate. Because if the hands of the mesh don't look accurate, then if your character is grabbing onto items, it'll look a little weird. Sometimes fingers can look broken or deformed or just unrealistic. And, so it's very important to match up the fingers, especially on your hand meshes. But in this case, I'm not doing anything with hands. And that's because I like to, when I can, keep the original hand meshes just because that's less work for me, and I'm all about thinking smarter and not harder. So we're pretty much all done posing everything up here, but as you can see, there are some slight inaccuracies if I just unhide the jacket mesh here. But that's okay. So what we're going to want to do is this. What I like to do is I like to duplicate the meshes, and I pretty much hide them. You can tell that they're duplicates because they have the 001 at the end over here. And then what I do is I press Control A, and I choose Apply All Transformations. And I press Alt-P, and I clear the parent and keep the transformation. And what this does is it'll basically remove these meshes from this armature, the bones that we use to pose it up. And so then what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to press this little wrench here, that's the modifier, and you're going to press Apply on the armature for all of them, which is why I like to make a duplicate, because if I need to go in and adjust the poses, I don't have to press undo a billion times. I can just go back to these duplicates, adjust the poses, make another duplicate, and repeat that process again. But what we're going to do next is this. I'm going to choose the jacket mesh, just so that way it's visible. I'm going to select the tie shape, which is the top half for this mesh. It's going to be named something else on your mesh, and then I'm going to use this drop-down menu to go from object mode to sculpt mode after selecting whatever mesh that you want to modify. And then you're going to want to scroll down to this yellow one that looks sort of like a weird Smurf hat or something, and you're going to choose elastic deform. And I just like to increase the size just because it makes it easier to work with. And so next what you're just going to do is you're going to drag everything with the elastic deform brush, so that way it just fits better with the overall mesh. And by default, it has the x-axis mirror on it, and that's great, and that's going to be great to work with for these types of things, but sometimes you will just have to go in and manually adjust everything on both sides by yourself. So I'm just going to time-lapse through this sculpting then. I'm just going to interject here real quick to say that this part is a little tedious, but it's also a part where you can have a bit of fun with how your mesh looks. If you have a certain way that you think the character looks, then you can adjust the mesh to match that. If you wanna, you can give your character the fattest fucking dumpy that you wanna. It's pretty easy. You can just mess around with the different sculpt tools to make it happen. I personally use the crease to give my characters big dumpies. But this is just a part where you can have fun with it, make it look how you wanna look, and just to sort of match your vision of the mod. Once again, interjecting just to remind everyone that it is also important to just be sure to hide all the normal meshes, just to be sure that you can tell, if your mesh that you're modifying looks a bit natural. So I noticed that these hips look kind of odd, So I'm just gonna go in and change that. Pretty simple. Alrighty, so once you're done making sure that your mesh looks like it matches pretty well with the original mesh, we're pretty much now all ready to do the fun part, rigging! So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to unhide everything, except for the coat parts, because honestly you don't need those when you're doing Dante stuff. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select it all, and do exactly what I did with the other mesh. I'm going to press Shift and D to make a duplicate, and then if I click it, I can take all of these duplicates by just control clicking every single one of them in this little list over here. And if I just press Control J, they're all joined together. And I'm going to rename it to something like join or dupe. You can name them whatever you wanna. Just so that way it appears at the top of the list up here, so that way I know exactly what I'm looking at here. And next, what I am going to do is I'm actually going to make sure that everything here has a material, and it looks like it doesn't have a material. So, I'm just going to give everything a material by pressing this little circle over here with the checkerboard. Just gonna press New. Nope, let's do that. I'm gonna do the same for this one. And I'm going to do the same for this one. And basically what this will do is this will make it easier to just separate them all later, but I'm actually going to join them all together for the time being while we rig. And then I'm going to right-click on the root here, which is the parent armature for the mesh that I want to transfer everything to. And I'm going to right-click the screen, and I'm going to press Parent with Empty Groups. And what that'll do is that'll make sure that this is under this armature. But it can't move quite yet. So if we go here to this little green triangle, I'm just going to delete all unlock groups, and that basically just deletes everything that's in there. And then I'm going to hide everything else over here. And this next part is important. The order that you do this is important. So you're going to want to select the join meshes first, and then you're going to want to press Control, and then click on the mesh that you are bringing into the game. And so what this will do is, if you go into object mode, weight paint, you can see that your mesh looks blue, but the mesh that you selected is the normal untextured color. And if you click on weights right here, you can click transfer weights, and what that'll do is it'll transfer the rigging from this original mesh over here to your mesh. That's why you gotta select it, the original mesh first, and then your mesh. But you're not quite done yet. So what you want to do is you want to select source layer selections, choose by name, and this will just transfer every single weight over from the original mesh to your new mesh. Because as you can see over here, it only has one mesh. And this will take a second, but once they're all over, what I like to do next is I like to sort by name. There we go. So now everything is in proper order, and in the case of DMC5, pretty much almost all the bones are numbered, save for some of the physics bones. But this basically just makes everything super duper easy to transfer over. So next you're going to want to go to Clean. Just click that little menu down there, choose all groups. And I'll take a second just so that way it can know it's applying to all the groups. And then for the limit, set it to be .01. So see .01. Just press enter. Give it a second. So what that does is it'll make the vertex groups look nice and pretty. And then you're going to want to go to smooth. And if you choose all groups again, you're going to want to, the only setting that you're going to change here is going to be the iterations of 5. And so what this does is it smooths between all of the different vertex groups to make sure you get a smooth movement. So that way it's not all weird and janky and geometrical when like he moves his arm up or something like that. And you're going to go to normalize all, and this will basically equalize all the different weights between the different bones. So that way it, again, looks smooth and pretty. And then this part is for RE Engine. You're going to want to limit the total number of weights to all groups to 8. And with that, you're pretty much done with transferring weights. So you can just hide this. And real quick, one thing I do want to point out is there is a difference between vertices and vertex groups. So what a vertice is it's basically a point on a 3D model that joins together with other vertices to make a face, which is what this thing in the middle here is, and a bunch of vertices and a bunch of faces come together to make this shape of a suit. And the vertex group is the group that weighs the vertices. And what the weight is it controls how much the vertices will move when you move the bones on the armature. It's all connected. It's all very complex, but it's not something you really need to worry about. I'm just specifying for anyone who might be wondering and for anyone who might be confused when I say vertices or vertex groups. But since we have everything all good to go, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go back into the materials. And the reason why I made sure that everything had its own material was so that way I can press A to select every single vertice, and I can right click, I can choose separate, and by material. And what that does is it separates the top, the shoes, and the bottom, all into their own different meshes, just so that way they're easy to work with. And the reason being is that there is a 60K vertex limit on submeshes in RE Engine. So you can't have anything that goes above 60K, and I usually go just a little below. I usually go around 30 or 40K for my models. But once you're all good with that, I'm just going to activate the hand and the glove stuff, because those are going to be ones that I keep. And I'm going to go to root right here. This is the original mesh, and it already brought me into pose mode, but you just do the same thing and you go into pose mode. And what we're going to do here is we're just going to rotate and move around all the different bones just to be sure that everything looks good. And right here, I'm noticing something that I don't like. I don't like that these are moving when I feel like they shouldn't be. I'm also going to do what I did before with the other ones. I'm going to set it to be in front, and I'm going to change the type to stick. And I'm just going to double check that the thigh looks good to go. Alrighty. It's important to just rotate everything around before you put it in the game, because then you can notice any big issues before doing all the effort of converting it back to an RE Engine mesh. So, the shin. Alrighty. Okay, everything looks like it's doing good. So real quick, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn back on the x-axis mirror. I'm going to rotate these up, and I'm also just gonna... Oh, no, not that. I'm going to grab them, so that way I can better see these, because I don't want this part to be moving. I just want it to be rigged to the chest. So after I'm done doing that, I go into object mode, select the suit mesh. I'm also going to hide the armature just so it's easier to do. I'm going to go back into modifiers, and I'm going to click this and this. And what these will do is it'll just basically make the pose show up in edit mode, because if I didn't have those click, what it would look like in edit mode would just be in the normal resting pose, and that's no good. So just click that and boom. And what I like to do here is, this is the process of basically just cleaning up your weights. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select, I'm going to change this to face select, and I'm going to do this. And by doing that, I'm able to select faces through the vertices. It basically makes the vertices transparent, whereas here, if I were to just do this, I would only select the vertices on the one side, and that's not what I want. I want to be able to select everything that is in there just to be sure that everything looks a-okay. And so since this is the left side, I'm going to go into vertex groups. I'm also going to toggle back over here just so that way it's easier for me to see. I am going to look for anything related to the left shoulder, armpit, or upper arm. So this one, upper arm twist, and I'm going to click this button, remove, and it's basically you just keep doing this until you get it to deform the way that you want to. So I'm just going to time-lapse my way through that. Just going to interject here to bring in something new for you guys. If you press this up here in weight paint, it lets you only paint the weights that are selected in edit mode. And so this is pretty useful for cleaning up vertices and rigging. So I'm just going to actually go to clean, go to smooth, go to normalize, and that'll make sure that you get a clean looking deform when you edit it. So this actually looks a bit better, but there's still a bit of changing that can be done. But you know what? I'm gonna call this good enough because it won't be super noticeable unless if you're one of those people who likes to take pictures of your game. But even then, it still won't be that bad. So I'm going to go ahead and just do a bit more cleaning up on this side, and then I'll go over to the other side. So I'd say I'm actually pretty happy with how this looks. I'm just going to do some other tweaks just to be sure that it looks the way that I want to. Okay, so once you're happy with how your cleaning looks, next what we're going to go over is, real quick, I'm just going to remove the pose by pressing A to select all the bones, go to pose, clear transform, select all. I'm going to show you guys how to edit textures. So, if you'll just follow me over to Photoshop, I'll show you guys what you need to do. Alrighty, so we're in Photoshop, and for editing textures, you can use Photoshop or GIMP, pretty much anything that you're comfortable with, as long as it can open .tga images. TGA or DDS is what we use for converting and editing DMC5 textures. So a few texture lingo that you need to know in order to, succeed and understand what I'm talking about, would be the diffuse texture. So it'd be the thing that makes Dante's coat red, the things that makes his skin look peachy, all that sort of stuff. The normal texture, or sometimes the bump map, is basically something that adds extra detail to the model that would be a little too taxing on the hardware to model on. So it's basically to just bring actual texture to the model. The roughness map can do many different things, but in the case of RE Engine, it controls the glossiness of a model. So if you have a roughness map and it is set to be maximum roughness, which would be, in the case of RE Engine, black, it would look really glossy, kind of like a plastic toy or something like that. The metallic map would be the map that controls, what makes something look dark and reflective. And that combined with the roughness map creates a sort of metallic look. And so for the case of RE Engine, that would be that would make the metallic map would be white to be actually like metallic looking. Another thing you need to know is ambient occlusion or just occlusion. And what it is it's a monochromatic map that controls the lighting of a texture or a model to make it look, to have it extra shading that would otherwise be a little too much to be like having the engine actually do itself. So it's basically shading that is baked into the model. And another one would be subsurface scattering. That is additional sort of lighting details, and that's usually reserved for skin, so it's not something that you need to worry about too much. And in the case of RE Engine, for DMC5 at least, these are stored on 3 different maps. You got the ALBM map, the album, that's what I call it. ALB stands for albedo, which is another word for diffuse, so once again, that's the color. The M stands for metallic, and so that means that the metallic map is on the alpha channel of the ALBM texture, and I'll show you guys how to deal with alpha channels and stuff like that. Next would be the NRMR map. I just call it the normal map just because it's quick, but NRM stands for normal, and then R stands for roughness, and roughness, like the ALBM, is stored in the alpha. And then the next one would be ATOS. So ATOS can control a lot of things. A stands for alpha, I believe. T stands for transparency or translucency, so that can control if a model looks transparent, or it can also control stuff like, excuse me, glow. O is occlusion, so it's ambient occlusion like we talked about, extra shading. And S is on the alpha map of the ATOS texture, and that is the subsurface scattering. So, for starters, what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this TGA file as a PNG, so that way I can pull it up in Blender. And what I want to do is I actually want to change the colors of this suit so that way it's not solid black. So I want to do a nice red and black sort of theme, because this is going to be Dante's suit. So if you just go into Blender, you select the object that that texture applies to. In this case, it would be the top of the suit. You go into Texture Paint, and it says Mode Material and No Textures, so we can fix that. Just press the little plus right here, choose Base Color, press OK, double click it, and as you can see, it's total white, pure white. Not what we want. So if you just go to Image, Replace, and then you go to where your texture is stored, in my case, it would be here, and it would be Cloth PNG. As you can see, this is like hella fucking black. So what I'm going to do real quick is I am actually going to increase the brightness and the contrast, so that way I can sort of get a better idea of where everything on this suit is. So just gonna do that, just so that way it looks a little more clear to look at in Blender. And once again, I'm just gonna save that as a PNG, save it, overwrite it, and do that. And I'm going to reload the image in Blender. And so it's a lot brighter, and so it's easier to tell, like, what is what. Okay, so this makes sense. So these lapels are supposed to be a sort of darker color compared to the rest of the suit. Okay, and in the case of texture editing, it's often very helpful to have the UV map pulled up. And what the UV map is it's basically the model unwrapping itself into 2D, so that way it's easier to understand what everything is for the... So what the UV map is it's basically the model unwrapping itself into a 2D version of itself. So that way it can apply the textures onto it, because textures aren't 3D, textures are 2D. And it's really hard to apply 2D objects into a 3D space, which is what the UV map helps with. So in this case, I can see that this section up here is the jacket, and these are parts to the tie, it looks like. And I can see that there's actually some clipping on the lapel and the tie, and that's actually pretty easy to fix. You just do G, Y, you know, you can fix that pretty easily. You can also go into sculpt mode and fix it, but for the time being, I'm just going to leave it be. So this section controls the suit, this section controls the sleeves, I believe. Yes, it does. Okay, so that's good to know. So now that we're back in Photoshop, what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose this tool, and I'm going to right click it and go to polygonal lasso tool. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select all of the different meshes here. Not meshes per se, but like, you know, the different textures for the suit. And I'm going to try my best to avoid any other textures that I see that belong to other parts of the suit. So right here, for example, that would be the parts of the necktie. And I'm also going to go and select the sleeves. And to do that, instead of having your selection set to this setting by default, set it here. And what that'll do is that'll add to your selection that you already have. So I'm just gonna try my best to just avoid any other parts of the suit. It doesn't have to be perfect, because, you know, no texture island or anything like that is completely perfect. And I'm just gonna keep going around like this. And It's okay if these two overlap because they're going to be the same color anyways. And then I'm going to press Ctrl-C, Ctrl-V to copy that. And that's just for convenience sake, honestly, so that way you can just quickly select everything. And then if you go down here, you can choose different sorts of color editing maps. So I'm going to choose Hue, Saturation, and then I'm going to select again, and choose Brightness Contrast. And I'm going to hide this Brightness Contrast map that I have set, and I'm going to set the Hue Saturation map to Colorize. And then I'm just going to up the saturation to a decent level. And it's important to remember that games like DMC5 have a pretty desaturated color style, so it's a good idea to try and match the sort of color style that the game is going for, so that way your model doesn't look too out of place, unless if you're doing something like an anime model replacement, in which case it doesn't need to be too perfect. So that looks like a good shade of red, so I'm actually going to brighten it just a little bit more, just to be sure that it shows up nice and good in the game. And then I'm going to, once again, save it as a PNG, and I'm going to refresh the texture in Blender and see how that looks. It's very important to just kind of go back and forth between Photoshop and Blender, just to be sure that everything looks the exact same way that you want it to look. So if I just hit reload, okay, yeah, that's a nice shade of red. But as I'm looking at this, I'm thinking this might look better for the EX colors. I'm not sure if I want to do the vest right here as red, or the coat right here as red. But that's okay if you're not sure what to do like I am. What you can do is you can just keep messing around with everything until you find a look that you like for it. So I'm going to do that once again. Just go back in. I'm going to hide that. And also, real quick, I did notice I accidentally got the tie in there up here. So what I can just do is I can just select it. And then if you click on the hue saturation map, you can click on this little black and white picture next to it, and you can paint it black. And what that is that's the mask that determines what is and isn't changed by the hue saturation and brightness contrast map. So what black means is that it won't be changed by whatever changes you have on the hue saturation or brightness contrast map. What white means is that it will be changed by that. As you can see, I painted that white. And if you do somewhere in the middle, it'll only be changed a little bit. And that's usually just used for making sort of gradients or transitions between different colors. But I'm going to hide these for now, and I'm going to figure out where the vest is on the UV map. I believe that this is the vest. Yes, I was right, that is the vest. So, what I can do then is I can just, once again, turn up that so I can just see a little better. And then just select the vest on the texture. So that's basically the entire process of changing the colors of textures, and this can be applied to pretty much any texture in any game. And this process is also useful for changing specific colors on textures in DMC5, or just any RE Engine game in general. So I'm going to just time-lapse through me doing this. Okay, so I'd say I'm pretty satisfied with how the textures came out. I like the colors that I chose, and I think that it would look pretty good in the game. So, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to show you how to apply everything into the game. So, for the case of the game that I yoinked this model from, Final Fantasy 15, it luckily has the metallic roughness and subsurface maps all in one, right here. So, what a lot of games will do is they will put the same types of maps onto different channels. So if you go from layers to channels, you can see, you know, what it looks like with RGB. So that's what it looks like by normal. You can click on red and you can see how the red channel looks. And so what this is this is the metallic channel. You can click on green and this is the roughness channel. That's what you use on the normal map. And you can click on blue and this is the subsurface channel. I'm going to ignore this because just by default, a lot of the channels in DMC5 don't have subsurface turned on. So I'm going to go and look for the normal map and actually copy over the roughness channel because I'm not really a big fan of the metallic channel either. So if I go and look for N out, that would be normal map. And one thing I do want to note is that it is important to know what type of normal map you're working with. If you're working with an OpenGL normal map or a DirectX normal map. The reason being is that the depth of the bumps is inverted on each one. And I'm going to throw up a quick picture that shows basically what I mean. If you're not really used to like looking at normal maps and reading them basically, you're going to be like, well, what the fuck does that mean? What does that have to do with me? But eventually, after doing this for a while, you'll understand what it means. And you can always figure out, oh, if a texture is OpenGL or if it's DirectX. And in the case of Final Fantasy 15, it runs on DirectX. However, for whatever fucking reason, Square Enix decided to make the textures OpenGL. So, if you want to invert the roughness of a normal map, just go to channels, choose the red channel, and press Control-I to invert them, green channel, and Control-I. And that inverts the depth of it, so that way it matches with DMC5. And it has a completely blank alpha channel. So now, you're just going to paste over the roughness map from wherever you obtained it from, and now you have a working normal map that will work in DMC5. And so I'm just going to save that as a TGA, and I'm actually going to drop it in right there. I'm going to drop it in the body folder so that way I can quickly export it, and I'm just going to name it whatever the Dante want to name it. I'm just going to assign it to the body _ NRMR .text.tga. And there we go. We're all good to export. And in terms of the ATOS map, which is the map that has ambient occlusion, what I usually like to do is I usually just like to make a new one. So real quick, I'm actually going to export this to the DMC5 texture format. A quick note about how the alpha channels work is that for the metallic maps, black is not metallic at all. White is completely metallic. For the roughness map, it is actually the opposite. So white is no roughness at all, or glossiness in this case. Black is completely super glossy. It's important to write that down somewhere just so that way you can remember it until like you're totally 100% used to it. So I'm just going to save this to a TGA. Once again, I'm going to go up to the... Oh, went too far again. To the Dante mesh. I'm just gonna take this, name it. Nope, that is not an ATOS file. See, sometimes you just kind of get these things mixed up when they're in your mind and stuff happens, but it is what it is. So I'm just gonna scroll. I did it again. Wow, okay. Just gonna go back up. PLO100 _ ALBM vertex.tga. So ATOS channels are actually a bit unique, and when I make my ATOSes, I actually prefer to just do custom ATOS. So I'm just going to name it RGB color, make it 1024 by 1024. So the thing about ATOS maps is that they are a lot like the map that I showed you earlier from Final Fantasy 15, in which instead of having like a normal like color map and then an alpha channel, everything is divided into each channel. So red controls the transparency, or red controls the transparency. Green controls a lot of different things, but usually in the case of DMC5, it controls the glow. And blue is the channel that we're interested in, because it controls the occlusion, which is, like I said, the shading. And it's pretty easy to make your own occlusion maps if your game doesn't have an occlusion map. Final Fantasy 15s do have an occlusion map, but I don't really like them, and I just prefer to make them. So if you want to make an occlusion map, it's pretty stinking easy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to merge the layers, unlock the background layer, select all, copy, and then I'm going to undo all of that, so that way they're back to separate layers. And then I'm going to make a new layer and copy that over. And it looks like I didn't do anything, but it's just so that way I can have all the original layers if I need to go back and change something. Then you're going to want to go to Image, you're going to want to go to Adjustments, click Desaturate, and then, once again, Image, Adjustments, and choose the levels. And what I usually do is I usually try to match the levels onto either side of these sort of black spikes up here, and then I usually change the output levels to just generally be lighter, because it usually just looks better that way if you have a lighter ATOS channels and you don't have to go too crazy on the shading. And then next, what I like to do is I go to Filter, I go to Blur, I go to Surface Blur, and I usually set it anywhere from the radius from anywhere from like 5 to 10. I'm a little over 10, and I set the threshold to be about 11. And then I just copy that over to the new Untitled one. I paste it onto the blue channel, and boom, just like that, we have our occlusion channel, handmade by us. And if there's anything you want to edit, like in my case, like I could edit this vest so that way like these sides have more shading on them, because that would be where the sort of suit jacket would fall, but I don't feel like doing that because I'm lazy. And it's pretty much the exact same thing for the other channels. If you want to do a custom glow on a certain part, like let's say I want to glow on the vest, I would just make everything white, and then I would make the vest blue, or not blue, black, and I copy it over into the green channel. And it's the same for transparency. If you want something to be transparent, white is solid, black is transparent. So do with that as you will. So now we're all good to save this. I'll save it as an ATOS body.ATOS. And so now I have all the textures for the top all ready to go, and I'm just going to dick around with the textures on the pants and probably the shoes, and I will be back once I'm done with that to show you how to export back to the RE engine format. Okay, so it took me a month to do those textures, but now we are back in Blender, and so we're ready to go and export our model and our textures into the DMC5 format. So, before we do that, what we have to do is we want to be sure our models have the right name. You could always add custom names to them using complex file editing stuff, but this is going to be simple. We're going to go for basics. So, for the top half, I'm going to assign this to the body. So I'm going to copy over this name from the body mesh, and then I'm going to paste it over onto our body mesh that we are replacing. And then for the shoes, if I recall correctly, I put them on the coat. So I am going to grab the coat texture, and I'm going to go paste that, just like that. And then, make sure I got the right leg mesh here. I do. And I'm going to copy over this leg mesh, the name of it, and I'm going to paste it onto the legs for the model that I want to replace. And then we are pretty much all good to go. So you can select every single model that you want to export. Then once you have everything all set to go, you're ready to export your mesh. So you're just going to just drag your mouse along and then select everything. So that's going to be this, the top, the pants, the shoes, the hands, and the armature. And I'm actually going to show you how to export it the normal way, because I really don't like using the Blender plugin to export. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that your settings match this. Set it so that way it only exports the armature and the mesh, only the selected objects, and then you're going to want to click this armature drop-down menu, unclick Add Leaf Bones, and unclick Bake Animation. And then you can just go into here, and that's where I have the normal mesh saved. So you can just name it PLO100 or whatever character you're replacing. In this instance, I'm replacing Dante, so it's just going to be PLO100.mesh.fpx. And then you can save it. So let's open up Noesis, and let's go to wherever you saved your textures and also your mesh. So for me, that's going to be in here. and I'm going to actually set it to sort by type. And then you can see all the different TGAs that I have exported. So, you know, when you're in Photoshop, you want to be sure that you're saving your textures as TGAs, and then just select it. And then you can do Tools, Batch Process, and it'll look for all TGAs in this folder. It'll output them. You can change that to 11, which is the DMC5 texture format. If you just choose Folder Batch, it should automatically have the folder that you have your textures in selected. Just press OK, and see, it looked for all the TGAs that I put in there. And now I'm actually going to delete this because I don't want them to be in their own custom files. Just want to double check that it saves all correctly. And I'm going to click Recursive, and then I'm going to click Export. And it's going to ask you to export over each text. And bam, all done. And if we go into the folder now, we can double check that everything exported. So I'm just going to change the view to details. I'm going to do the sort by date modified. And you can see that everything exported pretty normal looking. So let's just double click on one of them. Just open it with Noesis just to double check that everything saved okay. So I'm just going to refresh actually, because I don't know why it's not opening with Noesis. And then I'm going to actually choose modified instead of type. So that way I can just see, you know, when it was modified. And it looks like there's no errors, nothing corrupted, nothing got fucked up. So that's great. So you can see that I have my FBX that I exported from Blender selected. It's all in here, it looks pretty normal, looks pretty good. And you can also check the armature. Armature looks good. That's what this does right here. This just shows the armature that you use to pose it, and that's going to be in the game. Sometimes it might not be selected properly in Blender, and you want to be sure that you have it selected, so that way when you save it as an FBX, it will show up in Noesis and work in the game. So, we can go to File, Export, and we can choose this on the drop-down menu to DMC5 mesh. Just click Export, and it should handle it all for you. A little window will pop up asking you which mesh to export over. Just choose the default Dante mesh, or whatever character you want to replace. In my case, it's going to be Dante. I'm just going to click OK. And now that it's all complete, it takes a few seconds to export, but don't worry. That's just it doing its job. It's all complete. I can close it. I can refresh it. And I could check the mesh out. That is the one that we exported. And let's take a look and make sure that it loads correctly. Awesome. I'm not seeing any issues here. Nothing is out of place. Nothing looks wrong. So that means that we are all good to make a mod. So, if you want to make a mod, just open up your, wherever you have Fluffy Mod Manager stored. So in my case, it would be in DMC5, Mod Manager, Games, DMC5, Mods, and now what you want to do is you want to just make a new folder, call it whatever. I'm going to call this Suit Dante. I would call it Dante Suit, but I already have a lot of Dante mods, so that's just going to be cluttering up the D section of my mods manager. So once you have your folder all created, you want to go Natives. That's the first folder that you want to create. Then in Natives, you want to create a folder called x64. And then from there, you want to create a folder called Character, Player, and then in Player, you want to make sure that you have every folder for whatever character that you're replacing. So in my case, it's going to be Dante. So I'm going to do PLO 100 underscore Dante. And then I also want to add his dirt files in. So every character has a different texture for when they are a little dirty or really dirty. So Dante has two. So PLO 130 underscore Dante underscore dirt. And PLO 131 underscore Dante underscore mid dirt. And then inside Dante, I'm going to want to make a folder called PLO 100 underscore body. And then I'm going to open that. And then I am going to open back up where I have all my textures exported out and my model. And then I'm going to go to Dante Suit, go to where I have that exported. And I am going to choose all of my textures and my mesh. I'm going to press Ctrl-C to copy them, Ctrl-V to paste them in. And then this part is a little tedious, but it's not that bad. It's not as bad as any of the other stuff we've been doing so far. Just gonna remove every instance of out at the end of every single file. And the reason why Noesis does this is so that way it doesn't overwrite the original model or texture that you're saving. So it's good to always have the original version of whatever you are modifying. Just keep that in mind. Just always back up your original files, always back up your mod files, just always back up your files in general. That's just general advice, not even modding advice. And as you can see, we're already all done here. So next what you want to do is you actually want to copy this body, and then you're going to want to paste this in, and you're going to want to press F2 to rename it, delete one of the O's in 100, and make it 130 body. And then you can actually delete the mesh here. You don't need a mesh in the 130 folders or the 131 folders. And you're going to want to go through and just rename everything to 130. You could always copy over some of the files to make it so that way the game reads the materials for the clean mesh instead of the dirty mesh, but we're doing this the easy way, okay? That's a little bit more advanced, but you can always figure that out on your own later. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing here. I'm going to copy over 130, paste it into 131, and then rename it to 131, and rename everything else in here to 131. So, now that everything is all done, everything is properly in the right place, everything is renamed, we are actually all good to go into the game and actually test it out now. So I'm going to open up Mod Manager, I'm going to refresh my mod list, I'm going to search, and I'm going to look for Suit Dante. There it is, right there. So I'm just going to turn it on, and it says that it modified 28 paths in the game archive, so that's good. That means that it registered the files and it put them in the right places, and now they're changed in the game. So now we can go to the desktop and test the game. So I'm going to meet you when I'm in the game. Alrighty, so as you can see, we're on the title screen, and if I just scroll down a little bit, you can see that he's in the suit. He's looking spiffy as ever, and it looks pretty good, but we just want to hop into a mission and double check real quick. You can also go to the gallery and look at the characters to double check, but I personally like going into the mission just because you can run around, see if there's anything that looks fucky, see if there's anything that needs changing, all that sort of stuff. So we're in the mission, and I just start running around, and wowzers, it looks pretty stinking good. I'm just gonna do a jump, and I'm gonna pop open photo mode real quick. I'm just gonna double check everything, make sure it looks decent. And yeah, this actually looks pretty freaking good. I'd say this is something that we could grab a few pictures of, pop on Nexus right now, no problems. So yeah, I'd say that's actually pretty much the entire process of making a mod. From start to finish. So I applaud anyone who has stuck with me throughout this entire process, and I implore you to check out the DMC modding Discord. I will leave a link down in the description, and also just check the description for timestamps if you need to go back over anything, or if you need to re-download any programs that are also in there. But yeah, thanks to everyone who watched, and I'm sorry this took so long. I know I promised a few people I would make this. I started it back in May, and it is now June. Things happen.